Today's lesson is Chapter 10, Lesson 10, which can be found on pages 765 through 770. Our objective is I can divide whole numbers by fractions. Vocabulary, unit fraction. Question 1. The reciprocal of a number means to blank the numerator and the denominator. Question 2. When dividing fractions, your answer always needs to be blank.
Divide and simplify the answer and write it as a mixed number. So we have 4 divided by 2/3, and we've seen when you divide by the fraction, it's the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So this is going to be the same thing as 4 times the reciprocal of 2/3, which is 3/2, just swapping the bottom and the top number, the denominator and the numerator. Now, 4, we've seen this before, where we're saying, okay, well, if we know how to multiply fractions, you multiply the numerators times each other and the denominator times each other, but 4 doesn't look like a fraction. But you always have to remember a whole number can be written as that same whole number over 1. 4 is the same thing as 4 over 1. And now this becomes kind of a plain vanilla multiplying fractions problem. And so we could just multiply it out. We could just say that this is 4 times 3, which would be 12, over 1 times 2, which would be 2. Or we could divide right now. Well, let's do it both ways, actually. So we could say this is 4 times 3 in the numerator, which is 12, over 1 times 2 in the denominator, which is 2. Now, what is 12 divided by 2? 12 over 2 is the same thing as 12 divided by 2. Well, this is equal to 6. Or another way we could think about it, is divide the numerator by 2, well, that would give you 6, and divide the denominator by 2. That'll give you 1. 6 over 1, which is the same thing as 6. Now, the other thing we could have done at this stage right here is we said, well, look, we have things in the numerator divisible by 2. We have things in the denominator divisible by 2. So let's divide both by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So it becomes 2 times 3, which is 6, over 1 times 1, over 1. Or this is equal to 6. Now, this could be a fun one to visualize. So let's think about what this is. 4 divided by 2/3. Let's draw 4 boxes here. Let me do this. So let's say I have 1, 2. Let me separate them a little bit. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you could view 4 divided by 2/3 as let's divide these 4 boxes into groups of 2/3 of a box and figure out how many groups do we have. So where are our groups? So let's see, if we want, the first group is going to have 2/3 of a box in it. So the first group is going to look like this. It's going to have 2/3 of a box. Now the next group is going to have 2/3 of a box. So it'll have 1/3 from here, and then it'll have 1/3 from the next box. Then the next group is going to have 2/3 of the box. There's 2/3 left right over here. Then the group after that will have another 2/3 of a box. That is that right over there. Then the next group will have 1/3 from here and 1/3 from here. So it'll have 1/3 from here and 1/3 from here. That'll be 2/3. And then the last group will have 2/3, the leftover on this box right here. Now, how many groups of 2/3 do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6. 4 can be divided into 6 groups of 2/3. So it's just like regular division, sometimes a little harder to visualize because we're dealing with fractions.
All right, let's look at this in our book. And so remember, we're dividing whole numbers by unit fractions. And remember, a unit fraction is a fraction with a numerator of 1. So that's one of our vocab words. So a numerator of 1 is a unit fraction. In this case, it says a sports website has score updates every 1/4 hour. How many times does the website have score updates in a 3-hour period? So the problem is 3 divided by 1/4. So one way of looking at it would be, like he was talking about at the end of the video, thinking of how many 1/4s are in 3 holes. So here's the 3 holes, and you can divide each of these into 4ths, like that. So then we have to figure out how many 1/4 pieces are in these holes. So you would just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there are 12 1/4 pieces in 3 holes. But the other way to do this would be to work it out. Okay, so this would be like the example he was talking about at the beginning of the video. So we can make 3 into a fraction by just saying it's 3 over 1. And then our problem is 3 over 1 divided by 1/4. So remember he talked about using the reciprocal, and you can make it into a multiplication problem. So the reciprocal means we're flip-flopping the numerator and denominator. So we're going to do 3 over 1 times, so I'm flip-flopping that numerator and denominator, and I'm going to have times 4 over 1. And then you already know how to multiply fractions, so you just multiply numerators and denominators, and we have 3 times 4, which gives us 12, and 1 times 1, which is 1. So we have 12 over 1, which is the same as 12. So we got the same thing when we did the picture and when we did the reciprocal. Go ahead and look back at these 2 questions and answer them in the form, please.